for joining us today. I'm Holly Gibson.
And I'm Jordan Davis.
And we're so glad to have you invest some of your time with us this afternoon in our final webinar in this growth series that we've been running through for the last few weeks. We've been really excited to present this webinar series to you guys and kind of dive into some of the tips and tricks and best practices really for managing that growth within your company. We continue to really see and hear a lot of feedback from those of you out there kind of in the trenches, managing that growth on a day-to-day basis. It seems like there's so much growth going on, and so many of you are experiencing that expansion in your company. And of course, we're so proud and happy to be a small part of that, but definitely know that comes with a few challenges. So we wanted to put together this series and wrap this up today to kind of hone in on what some of those challenges are and how you can really utilize the tools that we provide in ConstructionSuite and ConstructionOnline to help you manage that growth.
Yeah, we've had a lot of great feedback over the past 2 weeks now. We've heard a lot of the challenges that we've brought up echoed, and really our clients and people who've called in have shared that they do struggle with maintaining profitability as their company grows and really picks up a great reputation and continues doing great work. And as a result of that, more and more projects start piling up. From there, of course, we then talked about keeping visibility on those projects when it gets to the point where you just can't be everywhere all at once and your team can't be everywhere all at once. We've heard a lot of feedback that is absolutely the case, and that the tools that we showed off in last week's webinar really do bring a lot of that visibility back, or at least help you prioritize maybe where you should be spending more of your time physically, while trusting your team to take care of things on other job sites. But today we're really excited to talk about managing your team's growth and your company's growth as well. With your expanded company's volume, or as you're picking up more projects, you might get to the point where you feel like you need to add more staff to handle the growth. And with that can come some questions. Well, what's the best way to bring people in on that, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what we see, so as we kind of wrap up and look at the last of this series, one of the other common threads that we see, and, I feel like, Jordan, we're so blessed we get to talk to people all over the country. We've got 550,000 of you out there. I feel like kind of part of that strong community in construction and really doing some great things with your business. But what we're hearing across the board, it's pretty universal no matter where you're located, is that, if you're in a healthy market, you're seeing that growth, then usually that comes with a couple of challenges. One is execution. So we kind of look at how do you continue to execute, but not only getting the work done, but doing that on that high level, doing that with the quality that you really demand, that your customers have come to expect from you as a company, what that looks like. And of course, we know that everyone wants to maintain that quality, but what we also see is that growth and scaling your company usually is going to result in a couple of different scenarios, often happening at the exact same time, right? Because one is that you're needing to get out there and potentially look for new people to join the team. So there's, the process of recruiting those people, bringing them into your company, helping them to really see, your vision for where you want the company to go and help them understand your standards for executing projects. While you're in the process of hiring those people, and I know I hear from you guys that it can be a challenge to find those new team members. You also have your existing team who's really often having to do more. You have maybe the same number of people but are doing 2 or 3 times the number of jobs. And so what we've really found is that there are some pretty specific things that you can do in using ConstructionOnline or ConstructionSuite to help build this repeatable process that we internally call this a recipe for success. You've kind of figured out how to be a successful company. How do you turn that success into something that you can then repeat over and over again, whether that's with your existing team? And so kind of the answer to both of those challenges is the same. And so we're excited to show you some of the tools today that'll really help empower your existing team, empower a newly growing team into being able to execute, the way that you would expect.
Yeah, and this webinar today, we're really excited to show 50-50 split, or as close as we can, to ConstructionOnline and ConstructionSuite. We really want to make sure that we are showing off exactly how you can implement processes in both platforms and really do that well. So if you are looking at, or if you're using one of our platforms now, and that one does not happen to be ConstructionOnline at the moment, first, we'd be happy to talk with you about it. But secondly, stick around because we will be getting to ConstructionSuite towards the end of the webinar as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we, of course, have a whole family of products here, and they're all fantastic products. Of course, different people are using a different mix there to get the job done in their company. So there's a lot of flexibility. But some of these best practices are really universal, no matter which platform you're using. Most of what we'll be going through today, these are universal best practices that you can use, kind of over and over and over again to really get your best use out of the software and really empower your team with it. So what we'll do is get started actually with our ConstructionOnline platform. So that's what I've switched over to show you guys today. We'll start there. And kind of dive into, again, some of the tips and tricks, things that you can actually take away from this webinar and begin implementing immediately. One of the things that I'll kind of start with today is looking at, when we think about building that repeatable process, I always like to think of those as sort of building blocks. So, as you're kind of building towards something that's of grand scale, right? You often want to start somewhere. So you don't have to build everything all at once, but what we really recommend doing, and if any of you, I recognize some of your names, if you've talked to me on the phone, you've probably heard me tell you, advice like use the templates. So, that'll be the first thing that we look at here is how you can really use templates. Now, I know a lot of you who are familiar with our systems and the templates that we offer have kind of looked at, some of that content that's generated for you. And that's really great to have as kind of that plug and play resource. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is that most of the content that you are creating within the system is something that you can actually template out. So as we think about execution and kind of turning those into actionable things that you and your team can use, I'll highlight a few of my favorites, beginning with the punch list tool within ConstructionOnline. You'll notice in my project here that I have my punch list divided up pretty organized. So with our punch list tool, you're able to actually come in and do some organization. We can put those in folders. I will say that a best practice and why I start with punch list is that it really is so much more than just your end of job inspection. It's a great tool for that, but if that's all you're using it for, there's probably a real opportunity for some expansion here, because I see people really use it pretty consistently for a number of different purposes. One would be that they're using it for kind of a daily QA. So your daily quality assurance, being able to have someone on the job site, feet on the ground, looking at, just kind of overall the health of that job site. And if you see something, go ahead and document it. Make sure that you're kind of adding that to the list. So if we look at, our daily QA punch list, you may notice that something is damaged. You can certainly just add that in on the fly. So it's really great use case there is, that you would have a punch list, just a holding place essentially, that you would be able to come in and add some of these daily items. But outside of that, you're often going to want to have a checklist that you can follow, and that's where the template tool and punch list becomes so powerful. Any punch list, by the way, that you make, you can turn into a template, so the process for doing that is easy. But an example that I'll use is, so my safety inspection checklist. Well, now I've created a template for this, and actually, so now I can pull this template up for my punch list and use it essentially for all of my projects. So it's not just something I built for one, or information that we have to hand enter. But I'm able to actually use that for all of my projects. So you'll notice that I've got, 6 items here listed. What this does in terms of thinking about team empowerment and what that looks like is it means that somebody on the job site can grab the mobile app, open up this project and go to the punch list, and they've already got the checklist there for them. So you've defined what you want that process to look like. You've defined the things that are a quality job for you or whatever needs to be looked at for that particular inspection, no one has to really think about that. You've already put the thought into it. They have the checklist or the template that they can use, and it's available, and you can actually set this up to be automatically available for every single job that you create.
Yeah, and this is so important because instead of letting your team cobble together what they think they might need for a project, instead you tell them from the start what your expectations are and what needs to be documented for every single project that you do. And this goes across every single segment of the construction industry. Whatever your key items are that have to be accomplished by your teams on the job site, go ahead and set up a punch list and start building it out. You might get to a point where you need to pull some other people in, maybe to ask them what they think needs to be added to or maybe refined on this punch list, but really don't just stick with just what everyone thinks needs to be done. Go ahead and give your team their checklist to make sure that they have what they need to be successful. I'll echo Holly's comment that a lot of people will end up using the punch list tool just for final walkthroughs and documentation of issues and things like that. The punch list tool is fantastic for doing that. In fact, we're not discouraging the use of the tool in that way at all.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. But it can do so much more than that. And really, it's simple. If you've spent any amount of time looking at punch lists, you know exactly how easy it is to put together something like this for your team, and how easy it is to copy it and move it into other projects.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Super easy to use it that way. And it's also easy, when you think about just documenting what your process is and looks like, even if you have someone that's not logging into ConstructionOnline, I've actually done a quick print up of the punch list. So it prints in a nice checklist format. So if you need to print this out and hand it to someone, or print this off and give it to your client, let them walk through with you and actually sign off on it. Super easy to do. Either way, the process is now in place. So you've empowered your team or multiple team members there to really execute up to your expectations by kind of taking greater advantage of this tool to really document all of those expectations in one place.
Mm-hmm. And instead of shooting from the hip, now you have an objective standard that you can point your team to whenever they have questions about what should be done.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And go ahead.
No, good. Well, I was just going to say, kind of moving on and looking at some of the other tools that you can, when I think about those building blocks, most of the individual features in ConstructionOnline can be templated out. So, of course, your punch list can be templated. If you're using pretty simple to-do list items, then those can also be templated, so you've got that you can build up as part of your project template. Of course, most people are coming in looking for, how do I get templates for my estimates and schedules, or they're coming in and telling us, every job that I do is so different, there's no way that I could possibly use a schedule template, or there's no way that I could possibly use a template for them. So I think that the next thing we'll kind of look at is not only how those templates work, but some of the flexibility that you may not realize is there as part of that template, because of course every job is going to be a little bit different, but that shouldn't, when you think about the best way to scale and grow your team and really give them a roadmap for how they're going to do this successfully, if you're not hands-on doing it yourself every single time, then these templates are really invaluable in making sure that they do that.
Well, and making sure that they don't forget to add something to your scheduled
Mm-hmm.
timeline, for instance. I appreciate sometimes when our custom home builders, people who are really focused on the craft or the artistry of their job, talk with us, and I can kind of sense that there's a bit of I guess you could say, like, hesitation. Oh, everything that I do is so unique. Everything that I do, there's no way that this could be replicated. But that's really what we found. That's really not true. More often than not, what we found is that there are specific items that just have to be accomplished for every single project. Maybe that doesn't end up built out into a scheduled template. Maybe that is a combination of to-do list items. Maybe that's a combination of to-do list items and a selection set. Whatever that may be, I guarantee you if you look closely at your projects that you're already putting into the system, you'll start to see patterns and trends. And with ConstructionOnline, we've made it really easy to actually take different parts of the platform and save those so that you can modify them and really make them more generalized, so that instead of starting from complete scratch and staring at a blank spreadsheet for every single estimate or staring at a blank Gantt chart for every single project, you start with something that helps you point your team towards what you expect and really what you need to execute your projects and to continue to deliver quality without having to have your hands on every single project from start to finish every single time, because that becomes unsustainable, or it might become unsustainable unless you're somebody like Steve Jobs.
That's exactly right. So when we look at the estimate that we're looking at here on our screen, of course, was made from a template. I practice what I preach. I have an estimate kind of built into the system. I actually have a couple of different templates, so I'll show you guys in a moment kind of what it looks like to have those multiple templates in the system and how you can pull in and use those. But what we're looking at here is just my standard 16 division template. So I've already got the organization there. A couple of things that I will draw your attention to as we're looking at this, because of course my template might look a little bit different than yours. Although if any of you want my template, you can feel free to email me after the webinar. I'd be happy to share it with you. But yours may look a little bit different than mine. But a couple of things to keep in mind. What I see that people often do here when they're making their templates is, one, you'll see that from a costing standpoint, you have the ability to use either a lump sum sort of base cost for each of these lines, or you can do quantity and unit costing. Best practice, what I see a lot of people do is, depending on the item, they'll go ahead and build some of that costing in, especially unit cost. So a lot of times people will build in a unit cost for that item, and then when they generate the estimate from that template, they'll be able to come in, fill out quantities, but have some consistency really. And like that benefits you in a lot of the other areas that we've talked about kind of leading up to this session today in terms of managing profitability and kind of knowing what you're looking at from a reporting standpoint. But certainly makes it easier on your team. You've got the control there over the cost and can really just allow someone to open up that estimate template and very, very quickly get started with something that is, not only is going to cover all your bases, but of course it's going to look good. Because that's the other question really that people will often have for me about using templates is, well, if I use templates, what happens if, I'm using it for a different, maybe job that's a little bit different in scope than some that I normally do, and I don't have, maybe I don't have a need to do. I actually had a client today to say, well, Holly, what about this? What if I have a job where I don't need to do site work? It's a kind of a different type of job, so I'm really not even going to use this section at all. Well, you can always delete it after you've made the estimate from the template, but you actually don't even have to. When you run your proposal, it's not going to include any items that are not being used. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to worry that it's going to print the whole template every time you want to give it to your client. So really there's no reason not to go ahead and put some of that structure in place. It's really just providing, again, that roadmap for how do we build a successful estimate at my company? Well, this is how, and if you don't use everything, that's okay. You don't have to.
Yeah, well, and what that really lets you do is it lets you start to hand over some critical components of your construction projects to other people on your team, and really helps build up and equip them to also be successful contributing members of your team. One of the glaring mistakes that I hear from our clients is that someone will forget a line, or they will forget to account for a cost. And some of the common wisdom I've heard from other clients I've worked with is that any amount accounted for on an estimate is better than a complete just mistake, forgetting to include that item on the estimate. By giving your team an estimate template to start from, you can pretty much guarantee that that's not going to happen. Or at least you can lower the chances greatly that something like that happens.
Yeah, I mean, you really can. I mean, and we hear about things like that. There are a lot of things I think that, if you have a little bit more experience doing certain types of jobs, you maybe are used to accounting for, and you kind of take that for granted, but maybe someone coming in new to your company wouldn't know to do those things. So this is just an easy way of communicating that to them without it having to be something you remember to tell them, or like, oh no, I should have remembered that. Same thing really goes for scheduling. So we've pulled up a schedule here. Again, this schedule built directly from a template. And again, it's so much power here to be able to really establish your, kind of chain of events there for executing a construction project. You've got the ability to kind of build in the structure to the schedule template that you want. You don't have to think about it every time. Just like with estimating, you don't have to use every line. You can go in and get rid of what you don't need, but that's usually a lot easier and faster than building the whole thing from scratch every time. Although we try to make that easy for you as well, like use the template. It's an easy way to get started. And I feel like, here a common question is, well, again, what if I don't use everything? You can get rid of whole sections at a time or have variations of an estimate template. Another thing that you can do from, schedule template, I said estimate again, but it's kind of a lot of similarities as far as how you're going to work with each of these types of components. The template is your building block for starting that project, and you're able to kind of tweak each job, so start with the template. You can go in and make some adjustments. Super easy from a template standpoint too, to define what is and isn't included. If I really had put this schedule together for this job by hand, and now I've decided, okay, I want to be able to use it on other projects, all I have to do is come in, create a template from the schedule. But one thing that you'll notice is it's going to ask me, what do I want to include here? So it doesn't have to be that the template is identical, but we can include our resources. So if you have, certain maybe subcontractors or vendors that you work with for, specific tasks, you can make sure that those are included. If, you want to keep those durations and predecessor relationships. But, there may be times where you don't want to include some of this. You can decide what you want included in your template, kind of however much of a head start you feel like you can get there.
Yeah, and when you move that template back into a project, so when you actually save the template into a project, from that point it's really, really easy to adjust the start date, and from that point make any of the project specific schedule adjustments that you would need to make. It's a huge time saver. But beyond saving time in the moment, you're also saving tons of time investment that someone on your team or maybe yourself would have to put into place. You're saving a lot of time in answered questions that otherwise might have come up. Really can't emphasize the value of putting together a great template to define your process for how your project should be executed. Really, with these three elements in place, your project's estimate, making sure that you're not leaving out certain items. Same thing with the schedule, making sure that you've accounted for the critical components of your project that have to be done, and really trying to take into account how long that's going to be, lining up deliveries, taking into account any delays and being able to communicate that if and when they happen, and also combining that with expected punch list items that should be completed maybe on a daily or weekly basis. Mm-hmm. There's no way your team can fail from that.
Yeah, really they are set up for success at that point. But wait, there's more. So we kind of look at, these individual building blocks, right? Because they really are, those are some of the core things that we would look at in building those. And I did want to show you guys how easy it is. Like I've jumped into a project here that doesn't have a schedule yet. If I need to add one, I can select to add. I'm going to create from a template, and then it's just going to give me a list of, hey, which template do you want to use? It's that easy. I would, go ahead and create it, shift up my start date, make any adjustments, and really at that point I'm off and running. And that whole process takes like less than a minute, so it's super easy. But if we want to speed this up even more, then, the other thing that you can actually do here is create entire project templates. So, when we're looking at ConstructionOnline, often, you may have different types of jobs and things like that you work with on a regular basis. We always give you the ability to have more than one template, so you're never really locked into having only one job template or only one estimate template. There's always the ability for multiples there. So that means if you're doing different types of jobs or have a different way that you would set something up, maybe for a small project versus large, you've got the ability to do that. When I come in to make a new job in ConstructionOnline, of course I can create a new one from scratch, or I can go ahead and create from a template. So here, if I want to use a master template that I've created, I would just simply select that template, go ahead and kind of hit continue, and it's going to essentially prompt me to, of course, name my new project. So we'll be able to give this new job a name. But what it's going to do is actually bring in anything that I've included. So we're not even necessarily having to go and find the estimate template we want to use, or the schedule template, or the punch list that we want to use. So we're going to build a whole plaza for my colleague Jordan here. We'll go ahead and save this. But what will happen is that not only is it going to go ahead and bring in those items, like for example the estimate, the schedule, the punch list, but additional things too, like for example folder and file structure. A lot of people use ConstructionOnline for that consistency in how their files are stored and named, and kind of what that looks like. So you would be able to actually have some of those items templated out. That's really a best practice for kind of how you would template out a to-do list as well, would often be part of an actual project template, so that we generate a job and we've automatically got everything included in that template. So I've generated Jordan Plaza here, so now I have a file structure already in place. So my team always knows where to go. We always are going to store certain things in certain folders. That's already done for me, and you're not really trying to reestablish that structure for every single one.
Yeah, if you are familiar at all with putting this together, so shout out to any office managers that might be joining us here, you know how long it takes to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row, to make sure that you have all of the documentation in place, and really being able to start with the structure even built out is a huge time saver, and really can give you a lot of peace of mind when it comes to putting together what you need for your team for the first project. I noticed that when you generated this project out as well, in the project template, you'd included us, the team, the subcontractors that you most likely have worked with on this before and wanted to include on this project again.
That's right.
Other suppliers and vendors. And really, there's just so much that comes across from making sure that you've built this out well in advance that you don't have to worry about, and your team doesn't have to worry about moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. So we generate that, and we already know, all of that's already there. We already know exactly what needs to be done, and all those components are included, including files, including people, including those types of assignments. So it's super easy to get a head start. Now, of course, we're looking at project templates right now in ConstructionOnline, but I actually want to jump over to our desktop platform, ConstructionSuite, because project templates are available, of course, in ConstructionSuite as well. Like I mentioned earlier, what we're really going through today are best practices for, giving your team the tools for executing. No matter which platform you're using, those best practices remain the same. I know, Jordan, the project templates in ConstructionSuite is one of your favorite tools to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is just as robust as ConstructionOnline. While some things might look a little different, Holly, you were right. Really, the principles that we're talking about today are universal across our platforms. There are specific building blocks, like you said, that just need to be in place to execute projects well. And we've built in a very, very similar system in ConstructionSuite as well. If you look, we have a few developments that we have running right now for different lots in our Baldwin Park project group. And what we've done, we've actually taken a really great project that we've built out here. This was the first in the actual build out of these projects here in ConstructionSuite. And we actually turned that into a project template, which does exactly what we were just looking at in ConstructionOnline, in that it takes the different components that were in the original project and actually pulls them into a project template, which we can then use to build out anytime that we need to start work on a new lot. So if we decided to pick up 3 more lots, it's very, very easy for us to go in and actually build out those projects quickly without having to start from scratch every single time. So those of you familiar with ConstructionSuite will know that when you're ready to create a new project, it's really easy. You just start a new project. You're guided by the project wizard. Some of you might not have a template section here because you haven't turned a project into a template yet, or you haven't built out a project template. I'm going to duck out of the wizard really quickly just to show you how you could do that. It's very simple. You just right click on the project and come down here and create a template from that project. Now, since we already have a template, I'm going to go ahead and jump back in. Once you have a template ready, you want to go ahead and just start planning out. So this is going to probably be, what is this, like 193? Yeah. And we'll go ahead and select our Baldwin Park template. And then from that point, we just finish it out and build out a new project. I'm going to go ahead and pick out the project type. For this project, it's production building, and the rest of the details we can fill in later, but we're going to go ahead and let ConstructionSuite build out our project. It's very, very similar to the process that we saw in ConstructionOnline. Basically, we're taking all of the elements that have made our Lot 185 project a success and our projects beforehand, like the base estimate template, the base scheduling template, and copying it over into a brand new project inside of ConstructionSuite. That way, our team doesn't have to start from scratch when they're ready to start building out a new project.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, they don't have to start from scratch, or they don't have to look back and say, well, what should I be using here? I know I'll sometimes talk to some of you guys on the phone. I'll have a call with someone, and we'll have questions kind of where someone is going back to an estimate. They're trying to find an old estimate or trying to remember which old estimate they want to find to reuse in a project that they're working on. Or they think their boss told them that there was an old estimate from about a year ago that they could probably copy. And so where do I go to do that? And so this just takes all of that guesswork out. We don't want to have to go back and usually dig through the system. I mean, it's great that all that historical data is there. We save it for you. It's secure if you need it, but you shouldn't be using it to go back to build every new project. We've got tools for that are going to really speed the process up for you. And again, thinking about setting your team up for success, how easy was that? You walk through, you pick, hey, which template I want to use, and now we have all of the components that we included when we made the template as part of that job. And again, that can be as much or as little as you like. So that could be, only kind of a job framework with some folders and maybe an estimate, or it could be really a completely built out thing, complete with resources and to-do list and all sorts of other documentation. That part's completely up to you. How it works is the same. That's kind of the nice thing about it, is you can really flesh that out as much as you want. It's still just as easy.
So, I promised a colleague, some of you might be familiar with, to show off his favorite feature today, because it really does tie into what we've been talking about so far, which is giving your team a recipe for success. I feel like we've emphasized this one section inside ConstructionSuite specifically pretty heavily over the past few weeks, but it really is such an impactful tool, and that is the project workflow. So you might look at this list and think, wow, okay, that's actually kind of similar to what we were looking at in punchlists. It is in a way, but really there's something that takes workflows in ConstructionSuite to the next level. Once you have, and I'm not going to go all the way into the details on building out these workflows. If you'd like to see that, we have a webinar that we just recorded about a month ago.
Yeah.
That shows you how to build it out, but really I'd encourage you to go watch that and then think about the application of the workflow and giving your team the recipe for success for a project. So again, I'm not going to hammer too much on it, but seriously.
It's an awesome tool. And I think so a common question that, that I'll get is, what's the difference really between a workflow and maybe a project schedule, or a workflow and a templated to-do list or something like that. So there's, a lot of best practices and scalability and repeatability that you can build into all of those tools. But one of the biggest differences is that the workflow is kind of that step-by-step process for how to run a project in your company from start to finish. So it's with a Gantt chart schedule, often we're looking at a construction schedule, whereas with a workflow, we're usually looking at pieces that come way before the actual construction and way after. You're kind of looking at everything from, best practice. This is your employee playbook in a lot of ways. When you think about kind of putting together something to help a new person coming into your company understand how you run projects, this is that playbook, just with a little bit more actionability built in. So we're often covering a larger chunk of that project kind of before and after with the workflow. So you just have a little bit of a different tool. It's kind of your cheat sheet, your employee manual, your playbook, all built into one. This is how a successful project gets done in our company. So, it's your way of really communicating that to the team. And I've actually had a chance, in the past, to sit in on seminars in the industry. My colleague Ian and I, who's not in this not in this webinar today. He's always in a workflow, but he's not in this webinar today. But we've had a chance to sit in on some seminars, and I know we've talked a little bit about this, but kind of out there in the industry looking at teams as they're growing, and one of the best practices we always hear about is kind of documenting, putting together some sort of manual, getting everything that in your head as the way that you want your jobs to be run out. And of course, all the tools that we've looked at today, all of your templates for different components and templates for projects are going to accomplish this, but the workflow is an all-star when it comes to creating that sort of process for your team. These are actionable items. So I know Jordan, we won't necessarily go into how to build each one of these, but a few unique things about the workflow is, one, you see how we've divided our workflow into phases. So this allows us to break up the job into those different phases, kind of give that a heading and measure progress through each of those phases, so we can see that really quickly. We're also able, when we build the workflow, to build in really specific action items. So you'll notice that some of these workflow items have those blue circles beside. What that means is that is an action that's going to happen, and you can actually launch the action right from that workflow page. So you don't have to go anywhere else, and you can launch anything from something in ConstructionSuite, like maybe a template, or a specific event, like let's create a to-do inside of ConstructionSuite or something like that. So it could be any sort of activity in ConstructionSuite. Document templates, as we see here. It could be that we want to launch to another program on your computer. So maybe you're using like a PlanSwift or something, so you can launch other programs, or you can launch out to a website. So if we have a certain website, like
I wonder what website we'd want to launch here.
Maybe we'd want to launch ConstructionOnline. Maybe we don't want to forget to give our client access to their portal in ConstructionOnline. So we type in where we want it to go, or maybe there's a website for permitting that you have to do in your area. It could really be anything. So now these are actionable. So not only have we outlined the process, but all someone has to do to successfully execute this process is click the blue button and kind of go from there, follow the prompts, and they're done. So it really is awesome. You'll notice, like as Jordan is clicking through some of these here, that that we can see that first section filling up. So it's a great way to, of course, monitor and manage progress through those different phases as well.
And it gives you, as someone maybe who is overseeing these projects, a way to actually review what's been done and then give your seal of approval.
It does. It does. And workflows, of course, can be built into those templates that we talked about. Workflows are also tied to project types. So in ConstructionSuite, you have a really cool way of being able to group and type your projects out. We talked about that on one of our earlier webinar sessions, but one of the things with the project type is that it automatically populates that workflow. So that's something that you can build out regardless of whether you're using templates. Just like the punch list that we looked at earlier, you can also print up the workflow and put it in someone's hand. So, it is just a great tool in terms of establishing that process.
If you haven't taken a look at this section yet in ConstructionSuite, it's really easy to get to. Inside of a project, it's under the Workflow tab. Inside of ConstructionSuite, if you wanted to define these items for your team beforehand, all you have to do is open up the project type options, select which project type you want to build out, or create your own, and start working. It's really, really easy to go in and set these up. And I promise the time that you put into this is going to pay dividends, huge dividends in the future.
Yeah, it really will. It's worth every minute in terms of an investment. It's not, of course, super time consuming to do, but you can take a couple of hours, sit down, really establish that process, and it's a game changer for a lot of people. It's one of my favorite things to show off in ConstructionSuite because I think it's such a hidden gem. I think it's the best kept secret we've got, except for maybe one more thing that I want to show you guys. So before we move into our final item that we'll cover today and start getting ready to wrap up, I do want to take a moment and pause and just say, if any of you have additional questions, feel free to go ahead and chat those over. As always, we have our outstanding colleague Sydney standing by on chat to field and answer your questions. Jordan and I will also keep a lookout for those always and try to answer those as we go along. In fact, we've kind of answered some of those, I think, as we've been working through here today. But if you have other questions, feel free to go ahead and take a moment to chat those over. And I think the last thing that we'll jump in and cover today is a little bit of a tip or a trick or maybe one of those hidden gems in ConstructionSuite. Not everyone knows that this is here, but it's super relevant for this discussion because, look, we're looking at how we're going to establish a repeatable process, but part of what's driving that is that we're needing to expand our team. And so one thing I wanted to make sure that all of you knew is that in addition to the tools that you have in ConstructionSuite to set up these processes, really get that in place for your company, we also have tools that are designed to help you kind of speed up the process of onboarding new employees, finding new employees in our contracts and docs section. So this is going to be available for those of you on ConstructionSuite corporate or developer level and above. But located within your contracts and documents section, you're going to head over to your document templates. And there's actually a folder or a section called Personnel Management. And you might have overlooked it a time or two if you haven't explored it. Usually when someone explores it, they'll sometimes call me up and say, Holly, I had no idea this was here. It's awesome, because there are just so many resources here. So there are everything from employee manuals. So maybe if you need to put together kind of a manual for working at your job, outlining working at your company, maybe we're looking at just background information on your company or attendance policies or vacation policies, things like that. There are other HR documents included, things like letters that you would use for like job offers, so employment offers, job descriptions, things like that. So you've got all of that included as part of the package. You have an operations section, which is going to give you a ton of resources just for, kind of some of that day-to-day HR stuff that maybe you feel like you need to do a better job documenting, and you'll often really start feeling that need to do that when you're bringing on a lot of new team members. So these tools are all pretty awesome. Everything from sign-in sheets to just write-ups of, maybe safety incidents or something like that. And then, of course, the safety manual is included as part of the personnel management package, which on its own is a huge value. A lot of people will want to get this package just for that safety manual because, to have one of these done, I think is a minimum of $500 to $1,000 just to kind of get a safety manual done or in place. And so these are pretty comprehensive. This isn't a 1 or 2 page document. Like that safety manual is really covering all the bases. This is the kind of introductory section there to kind of let you know what all's going to be included. But you can see that there's a safety manual that we've got the employee manual that we talked about earlier. So if you need to be able to offer a handbook to your employees as they're getting started, it's so awesome to be able to give them some, background information on the company and how you do business and what your expectations are, as well as some of the practical things that new employees often, wonder about, like kind of how confidentiality is handled, or how much vacation time will I get, or how is that measured. So anyway, great set of tools. Again, one of those hidden gems in ConstructionSuite, but I encourage all of you to go out and take a look, because there is a wealth of value just inside this one little folder. You've got so many tools at your fingertips to really help as you're planning for growth or growing out your team. Take advantage of these. These are awesome tools.
Yeah, at this time, we've been keeping an eye on the questions panel. We have a few minutes left in the webinar, actually. So at this point, if you had a question that you wanted to send our way, we're more than happy to take a crack at it. If the question ends up appearing a little more company specific, or something that we might want to have a one-on-one conversation with, you can feel free to send that in. We'll be taking a look at a list of all of the questions, and we'd be more than happy to talk with you about that and maybe set up a time. But if you do have a question, send it our way. We're excited and we're keeping an eye out for it.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of good questions coming in. A couple of them are pretty specific to the companies that you guys are running, so we'll kind of jump in and follow up with that. One person was asking kind of a specific question, but in a more broad sense, about additional modules or things like that we're working on here, and it's so exciting. Of course, we're kind of coming up on such a great time of year. We're always working on new things, but usually, especially in the spring and fall, we'll often have new tools and features and things like that available to you guys. So make sure that you're, keeping in touch. Of course, attending these webinars and sessions like this. We'll usually do webinars to launch or kind of sneak peek or show you new tools that we're working on here, because really, ultimately, our goal is your success. You may have heard us say this before, but it really is, kind of the how we work here is one of the first thing our new employees learn in our manual here is, our goal is our customers' success. And so with that, we really are always kind of developing new tools and features and kind of ways for you to use those. So there are definitely things like that always being worked on. I know some of you have kind of specific, it looks like a couple of you have questions about specific modules, so we'll be sure and follow up on that. But there definitely are always new things being worked on and added. We feel like that is, part of our investment in your success.
Yeah, and something that I think bears mentioning now that we've kind of opened this topic up just a bit, there is so much excitement building for the new ConstructionOnline navigation. We didn't really touch on it during this webinar series, but I'm sure everyone noticed the green toggle in ConstructionOnline that says new, and everyone can see how just responsive and gorgeous the new navigation is, and really how useful it is as well. We are incredibly excited, really excited for the launch. It's not going to be this afternoon, but it is coming, and it's coming very soon. We're very excited.
Yeah, we are. Always new things is always such an exciting thing, and that's such a great example of, things big and small that we're working on for your success there. So with that in mind, we will actually let you guys go ahead and get back to your afternoon. We appreciate you taking some time to invest in your business by spending some time with us this afternoon. As always, if you have follow-up questions or you want to get in touch with, either Jordan or myself or really anyone on our team, feel free to pick up the phone and give us a call. We're here at 800-700-8321. All of you on the webinar today have my email, of course, with your invite. I always look forward to hearing from you. So if you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. As always, we do record these sessions and we'll make them available on our YouTube channel, usually within about 24 hours. So all of our webinars that we've done previously are there for you to go back and review anytime you like. And yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, I hope you all have a great weekend. Take care.